All right, welcome back to the Jazz Piano School podcast, episode number 193. I'm your host, founder and creator of Jazz Piano School. My name is Brendan Lowe. Thank you so much for being here. In this particular episode, I finally got back to doing the podcast because I've been working endlessly, tirelessly on creating all these new updates for our launch, which is coming up really soon within the next couple weeks. So it's going to be really awesome. But in this particular episode, I'm going to be breaking down and dissecting a Bud Powell bebop line, and more specifically, I'm going to be talking about improv Lego building blocks. Now, what are these? Well, I'm going to explain that inside of this podcast, but a lot of times when you learn licks, you learn lines, right? It's a long string of notes, and guess what happens? When you go to play a solo, it's never really good for a couple measures or eight measures or so, right? But you get to that one spot. And that one spot where you know you have a lick, you have this burning lick and you're just waiting to play it, right? So you get to that spot and out of nowhere, it's like burning line, right? For 2 or 3 measures. And then after that, what happens? You go back to the kind of like noodling, not so confident improv that you were doing before. And it sounds really weird because it's like, okay, burning, okay. And you can clearly tell that line was a cookie cutter that you just placed into your solo, right? I know it's happened to all of us. So in this particular episode, I'm going to be dissecting improv Lego building blocks in Bud Powell's solo over Anthropology. And it's going to be a 3-part podcast series, which I'm going to take apart the first 2 A's, the bridge, and some of his other playing. All right, so that being said, let's dive right into this episode. Here we go.
All right, welcome to the Jazz Piano School podcast, episode number 193. I'm your host, as always, Brendan Lowe. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for all of your support. We've been getting a lot of really kind and nice emails filled with appreciation and gratefulness, and I really love that. I love hearing from people. I love seeing your response and your support, and it's amazing in this time because it's hard for me too. It's hard to keep going in these crazy times right now with COVID and everything like that. And I'm just like you guys. I wake up sometimes and I feel not good. I feel crappy. And when I see those emails from fans and anyone who just writes in randomly, anybody at all, from all over the world, and it makes my day. And it actually it's what keeps me going, doing this. And it's hard to do something consistently for a long time, like to produce and these lessons and podcasts and Lick of the Weeks and everything like that. But I do it for you guys. And honestly, those emails and the kind words that expressing how much this has changed your life and how much you appreciate this, it honestly is. It's what keeps me going. So if you ever want to write in, feel free to do so whenever you want, right? Because it'll always make me happy. Trust me, I will never get sick of hearing how jazz piano has changed your life. And if our education has affected you, I would love to hear about it, okay? So clearly you might be able to hear I'm a little struggle right now. I'm kind of struggling. It's spring in Sacramento, and my allergies are just going nuts. So I'm not going to talk too much right now, but I want to dive into this lesson. And so what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be, I was having a conversation with someone through email about this bonus that we have in the membership called Lego building blocks. And it's about deconstructing solos, but to use the solos, how to use solos, how to use transcriptions effectively. And what I like to refer to is that of using them as Lego blocks. So like I did a couple episodes ago, I took a bonus that we offer inside the membership from there called my improv blueprint, right? Masterclass, bootcamp class. And what I'm going to do is kind of the same thing. I'm going to teach on a theory that I have in a bonus that's inside the membership, and that's going to be on using solos and transcriptions, but taking building blocks and thinking about them as Legos and creating kind of this, journal or, database. And they're not licks though, okay? They're very different from licks, and I'm going to explain that as I go further. But licks are more kind of lines, like lines that flow over a 2-5-1 that do not change, okay? So that would be like a a 2-measure lick, could be a little bit smaller, but the Lego building blocks that I'm talking about are like 2 notes, 3 notes, maybe most, 4 notes about that. Okay. Not 3 notes most, but about 2 to 4 notes. They're not strings of notes, right? Because when you have these strings of notes, it kind of locks you in. So the longer the line, the longer you're locked in. And that's why I wanted to take this time to deconstruct Bud Powell's Anthropology solo. It's going to be 2 parts. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I'm going to do the first 8 bars that he has a solo, which is very sparse for Bud in a way. And I'm going to do the second 8 bars as well. So the first 2 A sections, maybe I'll do 3 parts. Maybe I'll do the bridge as well because he's got some good stuff there. But this is going to be all about Legos. And so these Legos are going to be small building blocks. And I guess I will leave it for the lesson to explain more. And again, I apologize about my my voice and my state of podcast, and my mic is very sensitive, and it's a really good podcast mic, so it picks up everything. So again, I apologize about that. I'll try and be conscious of my sniffles and my non-ability to breathe. But with that being said, let's dive right in. Here we go. All right, so these Lego building blocks are going to be small little patches. So Bud starts his solo off like this. So what I want you to take away from this, and I'm going to keep going in the solo, is these small building blocks you want to use and really harness and pick apart what you like, right? So that was very, very simple, and I want to start with a very simple example. So clearly, you can do lots of things with one note, which he's doing. He's just playing this rhythmic pattern. And it's on the 5, right? And you really got to go into detail on these types of things, right? So he's starting on the 5, and then he's going up to, I would call this the 3 of, if you're thinking in the key of B flat. So we're in the key of B flat here. So I'm just thinking all B flat here, right? He's not really playing over the changes. And that's it. That's a building block in itself. That's a Lego block right there, right? So if that's something that you like and you kind of relate to, you can put that in your database, right? In your journal, and be like, okay, anytime I'm kind of thinking over more of a 1 major chord, let's say you're in the key of C. It doesn't have to be over rhythm changes, right? It could just be like a C major 7, right? So you could have this, right? And then you could start your solo off like that. Now, the great thing about these Lego blocks is that you can alter and change them. So maybe you don't want to play that rhythm. I might just go. Now I added my own little flourish there, my own little spice, right? I added a little roll. Bud didn't do that. He just plays this. Right? But adding that little flourish, that little spice, is what you can do to these Lego blocks. The purpose of the Lego blocks is that it allows you freedom to change, morph, and manipulate them into your own, right? So again, if we have this C major 7 chord, now from there, I can also roll down. I can do this. You see how I added a little space in there too? Right? I could do 1 slide here. Right? Or I could come down. So already I'm starting to gather ideas from this one simple line, right? Now, again, this is a Lego building block. It's not a lick. It's not a 2-bar phrase, right? Something like that or whatever it is. It's not this like big long lick that you're having to memorize. Something like that, right? When you learn licks that are long streams of lines, you're kind of locked into those. But what I'm doing here is deconstructing these small bite-sized pieces of his solo. And when you go deep into analyzing them, you can start to use them and build them on your own. So we've taken apart the first 2 measures, which you're probably like, Brendan, that's 2 notes. I'm literally using 2 notes, but I'm creating multiple ideas for them. So let's go on, okay? So he has... So where is the next Lego building block? It's this. So what is that? Like, what is that line, right? So essentially he has, again, we're thinking in B flat, he has 9, 7, 1. So what's happening here is this is a bebop approach, and this is chord scale above to half step below to the 1, and then he resolves down to the 5. And again, for a lot of more intermediate or advanced players, this is going to be pretty common knowledge, but you can still think about this with an open mind and use these in different ways. So this happens on the 4, the downbeat of the 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, and the and is on the 5. Now we can transfer that to any other key, right? So again, he's using 9, 7, 1, or you can think about this in terms of 2, kind of like 2, 1 whole step above the root, half step below the root, and then to the root, and then to the 5. So if we were to do this in the key of E flat, we'd do this. A flat, right? Wherever you want. So that Lego building block, that's our new building block, right? So again, we can use this in a lot of different ways. So it doesn't have to be on the 4, maybe we use it on the 1, 2. So again, we'll go back to our C major 7 example, right? So maybe I play 1, 2, and 3, and maybe that's how I start my solo off. And let's say it's 2 bars of C major. Maybe I build onto my solo with the first Lego building block that we had originally, this one. Right? So I'm switching the components that Bud uses. So I'm going to go 1, and I changed the rhythm just a little bit because I wanted to, right? I'm morphing the building blocks, right? 1, 2. Maybe I'll do that, right? So you want to really isolate these building blocks and use them and play around with them. And again, that could start on any beat. But the purpose of that is that, again, that's a building block. And as long as you want that C, because that's our target note, you want it on the downbeat. So maybe I have a scale. I just have a 5-note pattern here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, not in the key of C. I mean, this is 7, 6. I'm just talking about 5 notes. I'm running down the scale 5 notes. That's a line right there that I've created with a 5-note cluster. And then the Lego building block that I just used, right? So you see how this is coming together? So let's keep going in this first 8 bars here. So he has, so back to the key of B flat, right? Now this is a really cool thing. He has a triplet. So that right there in itself, not going on further, if you're looking at, you should be looking at the music with me, but going on further, it keeps going. But all I want to take out of this is the triplet. So triplet, and that itself could be a building block, right? So he's tripleting. He's tripleting down into the 6. And then finally, his actual target is the 5, right? So he has, that's his target note, right? So this is starting on the 3. So 3, pull it, 4, and 1. Right? So that right there, this is the 7, okay, of like a B flat 7 chord. So let's start from the beginning here. Now you can analyze this in 2 ways, and if on the chord that's happening here, this is, if you're using kind of like 1, 6, 2, 5 changes, this right here would be the flat 9. Sharp 9 of the G7 chord, right? So now again, this target note here, that's where he's going to from this line, right? But it keeps going. But my main point here is that this Lego, that is, a Lego building block there. So in the key of B flat, we're in the key B flat, and I would rather you can think about it in 2 ways. So you can think about using this line over the key of G7, right, and leading down to the 7. So flat 9, sharp 9, flat 9, 1, passing tone, down into the 7. So if I were to do this in the key of C, right, so here, flat 9, right, down to the 7, right, down to my 7. Now that's one way to think about it. So for all your dominant chords, you now have this little cool Lego building block that you can use, right? and I could do it, it doesn't matter. You want to practice all over, but that's your Lego building block there, right? And so again, you can start to combine things. Let's say, go back to our C major 7 example, right? Let's say it goes to an E flat dominant chord afterwards. So that would be my dominant line that we just took. But before, right, we had this, we had that, and then we had, and then I might do this, right? So I'm building off of the Lego building blocks. Now, obviously, you need things to connect that, right? But I'm purely talking about the deconstruction and the rebuild of these Lego building blocks so you can use them on your own and start to build up this database, this collection of these little types of movements that you can use and build like Legos, right? You put them together and piece them together. So back to the solo here. So it keeps going, right? So obviously that wasn't the end of his line. Now this in itself, right here, that is more of like along the lines of a lick, I would say. But it's also a Lego, but you can split this up into 2 parts. You can call this one Lego, because that resolved to the G. And then you also have the last half, which is just of the C minor 7 chord. So again, this would be over a C minor 7. So he's approaching the 3rd here. So 11 into the 3rd. Or you can think of chord scale above the 3rd, here, the minor 3rd, chord scale above, half step above, and then into it. So this. So that would be your Lego building block. Right? No matter where you are, what key you're in. And you hear this all the time in jazz. This is a very common Lego building block. Right? You also hear that. Everything, all these little Lego building blocks are going to compile together to improve your solo, right? So this is, I would practice this and use it in different ways. You could do that. You could do that. Doesn't matter, right? But the purpose is that you take these little Lego building blocks, right? So, and then the second part, that's a super easy one that we can use really, really easily. So 5, 7, 9. It's just a G minor triad. It creates a really nice movement. Right? And you can, I mean, obviously I started to mess around, but I'm creating motifs off this. It's just off 3 notes, and you can already start to make it sound good. And again, if you start to combine, that's more of a bebop line. Obviously, I was playing more of a modern style, but again, that's the end of the, so the beginning of the line, right? So he has this. So he has 1 and 2 and 3, and can't really count and play at the same time. Right? And that whole line finishes. Now, if we keep going here, so that's a super easy one. Right? So chord scale above, root, half step below, root, and then triad, major triad. That one is a great Lego. Like you should be able to use that whenever you want, right? That's great. I mean, it's such a great one. In the key of C, right? It's a great way to finish lines off, to start lines off. You can start a line off if you have a break. You know, if you have an ending or like a, you have. Or if you're ending a song, you know, you could do a double hand thing to end it, right? Kind of doesn't really resolve, but it's kind of a cool thing. But that's a great Lego right there. You know, that can be used in so many different ways, in the middle of solos and the end of solos, right? And that's a super easy one. So he leaves some space here, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Now this, depending on the chord here, like if you have, in rhythm changes, you have 1, then sometimes you have 1 over 3 or dominant over 3 or 6 chord. Diminished, right? So here he's playing essentially you're leading up to the 5. So here you have 1. Here's our diminished chord, right? Into the 5. And then 2, 5, 1, right? But essentially what's happening here is if you look at this, he's coming down a C minor 7 chord to get to the F. Now again, I'm not sure technically like where the bass player was or what he was thinking. If he probably wasn't thinking over this diminished chord. He's probably thinking more of like a sus sound, right? Like a delayed resolution, right? So again, 7, 5, 3, 1 for the C minor. You know, that's a great sound to use over like a dominant chord, right? So if you think C minor, this would be for your F7 chord, right? Here's F7 and I'm thinking C minor. Right? So the C minor chord, you're going to think a fourth down from whatever dominant chord you're playing. A fourth down, you're going to outline the chord, come down. So let's say I was playing a G7 chord, I would think D minor, a fourth down, right? Just like that. And again, then you just hit the root. So if I was playing B flat 7, I'd think a fourth down, F minor 7. Right? It's a really cool line. You know, you could come down, in different ways. So really cool Lego building block there. And then finally, he finishes off with this cool thing. He has a 16th note. Now, if we look through the entire first 8 bars, he has no 16th notes. He has 8th notes. He has quarter notes. He has a half note. He has a triplet. And that's it. Now, this is the first time he uses a 16th note. And he goes 4E and a 1 and. Right? 4E and a 1 and. And in context, so he has... That's a really cool thing. So, right, because he's finally adding a 16th note contrast, and I call this more of like an ornamental 16th note, right? Because it's just ornamenting the D. Essentially what he's doing is this. So again, just resolving down into the third. So 4 and 1 and. Now, if you take this concept and you look deeply into it, because there's more behind this, a lot of people just see the 16th notes, but he's ornamenting the 8th note bebop approach. Half step above, half step below, into the third, and then down to the 5. Now, if that's the case, then any bebop resolution or ornament, bebop approach that you have, right, you can ornament with the 16th note. You know? So any type of ornament, so again, back to the C minor 7, right? That's an 8th note approach. So to make that a 16th note ornament, I can go. Does that make sense? So any bebop 8th note approach, I can ornament and make it sound more elegant, more classy, more flashy by adding this 16th note ornament. Right? It's a really cool thing. So that's all he's doing. So he has this resolution and he's going really, really cool. And again, it's to the third. So you want to think about chord scale above. Let's say we're in the key of C, chord scale above, half step below, down to the third. Practice your 8th note approach first. And then if you want to start to ornament it, because it takes a little bit more dexterity, more technique, right? Then you have this. Okay, whatever fingering is best for you, because depending upon the key, it's going to change, right? But I would stick with something around 3, 4, 2, 3 thumb. Right? So let's walk through this again slowly. Right? Really, really cool stuff. And again, if you just looked at that, or you learned it all in one string, it's like a strand, you just learned all those 8 bars, you wouldn't have the detailed Lego building blocks that you can now start to piece together in different ways. There's so much more content that most students overlook inside of 8 bars, 4 bars, 2 bars, right? And most people are looking at it with this big frame of mind, like, okay, this is a cool 8 bar line or lick or whatever. And we're going to see that more as we get into the next section in part 2 and part 3 as well for the bridge, right? Because you really want to go detail inside all of these types of lines and really think, how can I use these as small building blocks that I can start to piece together in my own way to create my own solo. That way you're not just copying people. And again, I hear so many students, right? They'll be... And I'm like, whoa, like what you played, like what was happening for the first like 6 bars, and then the last 2 bars you had this kill and like I'm like, where did that come from? Like clearly they've practiced a lick and inserted it into these 4 bars, these 2 bars, and then the rest of the solo is just, unfortunately not able to keep up to par. That's why it's so important to practice these Lego building blocks, study them and use them, experiment with them and spend time with them so you develop a relationship with them in all different keys. And then you can start to piece them together yourself. You're creating your own solo in improv, which ultimately, guys, come on, let's be honest. We know that's what we all want to do. We want to be able to play this stuff ourselves. Like we want to be able to create ourselves. We don't want to have to copy what other people are playing. Like that's what Bud's for. I love listening to Bud because he did this himself. I love listening to Oscar. I want to be able to create what I want to be able to create. And I know all of you guys do out there as well. Okay, so I'm going to see you guys in part 2. Thanks so much for watching. And that was pretty awesome. I love that. Part 2 and part 3 get more in detail because Bud starts to let loose a little bit. So that's going to be a lot of fun. With that being said, take care, have a fantastic day, and happy practicing.
All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm going to be doing more of this solo in the upcoming episodes. Definitely go to jazzpianoschool.com to check out all of our free education we release, and subscribe to our channel down below because we release a new podcast episode every single Wednesday and a new lick of the week every single Monday. All right, hope you have a fantastic day, and as always, happy practicing.